She shaved her head. She dressed in a man's cloak. She lay alone in a dark room and waited for a husband she had never seen in daylight. This was her wedding night. In ancient Sparta, this was completely normal. She would go on to own land, take multiple sexual partners with the full blessing of the state, and publicly shame any man she found cowardly. The rest of Greece called it a catastrophe. We need to talk about why. The year is 480 BC. In Athens, the city we put on a pedestal, a woman cannot leave the house without a male escort. She cannot own property. She cannot speak in public. She cannot choose who she marries. She is transferred from her father to her husband like a piece of furniture, and she will spend her entire life inside four walls. When an Athenian woman dies, her name does not go on her gravestone. She passes through history without a trace. 70 miles south, in Sparta, a woman is walking through the city, alone. She has just come from inspecting her estate, land that legally belongs to her. She is about to conduct a business transaction. Later, she will train. Her husband, a soldier she sees maybe twice a week, knows better than to come home and give orders. The rest of Greece is watching, furious, fascinated, and deeply, obviously terrified. But to understand why, we need to start at the beginning. In Athens, girls were fed less than their brothers, kept inside, taught to weave. Physical weakness wasn't just accepted, it was the point. A small, pale, obedient Athenian woman was the ideal. Lycurgus, the man who designed Spartan society from scratch, thought that was insane. His logic was brutal and simple. Weak mothers produce weak children. Weak children produce weak soldiers. And weak soldiers lose wars. Sparta could not afford to lose wars. So Lycurgus did something that made the rest of Greece genuinely uncomfortable. He made the girls train. Spartan girls ran. They wrestled. They threw the javelin and the discus. They competed in races in front of crowds that included young men their age. They were fed the same meals as their brothers. They were pushed just as hard. And here's the detail that sent Athenian men into a rage. They did some of this training naked, not for spectacle. The Spartan philosophy was simple. The body is a tool, not a source of shame. And tools need to be tested at full capacity. Clothing got in the way, so it came off. By her teenage years, a Spartan girl could read, write, compose poetry, and throw a javelin harder than most men in Athens. Now, you might be thinking, fine, strong women, great. But surely when it came to marriage, to sex, to actual power, Sparta reverted to type? It did not. In fact, this is where things get genuinely disturbing. To understand what happened next, you need to forget everything you picture when you hear the word wedding. There is no ceremony, no flowers, no guests, no celebration. A bridesmaid shaves her head completely, then dresses her in a man's cloak and sandals, then leaves her alone on a mat in a dark room, and she waits. At some point deep in the night, her new husband sneaks out of the military barracks where he lives. Soldiers under 30 are legally prohibited from living with their wives. Creeps into the room, has sex with her in the dark, and leaves before dawn to sneak back to his unit. That's the ceremony. Now pause on that image for a second, because Plutarch, the ancient historian who documented all of this, adds one detail that I want you to sit with. It was entirely common for a Spartan man to father multiple children before he ever saw his wife's face in daylight. Multiple children, never seen her face. The Athenians would have been horrified by this. They were. They wrote about it, scandalized. But here is what they missed. Because her husband is not there, ever, really. She runs everything. The land, the money, the food supply, the servants. Every decision, every key, every account. The entire financial operation of the household. When he finally shows up at 30, he is walking into a house that has functioned perfectly without him for years, managed by a woman who has been making real decisions while he was learning how to stab people. This was not an accident. The Spartan state needed someone to run the economy. While its men spent their lives at war, the women were that someone. And in giving them that responsibility, Sparta gave them something far more dangerous than freedom. It gave them power. But here's the part Athens could never bring itself to say out loud. the freedoms we've covered so far. The training, the land ownership, the marriage, that was normal. That was Tuesday. What came next is what kept Aristotle up at night. By the 4th century BC, Spartan women as a class owned nearly 2/5 of all the land in Sparta. 2/5. Did this personally. He was furious. He wrote that Spartan women had become ungovernable, that they had opinions on political matters, that their husbands actually listened to them, and that this was one of the primary reasons Sparta would eventually collapse. He meant every word as a condemnation. From here, it reads like a compliment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Property rights, fine. But surely Sparta drew the line somewhere. It didn't. If a marriage produced no children, divorce was not shameful. It was expected. Remarriage was encouraged. The state needed warriors. Romantic exclusivity was an Athenian obsession. Sparta had bigger concerns. Plutarch documents a specific arrangement. A man who admired another man's wife, her intelligence, her strength, the quality of her children, approached the husband and formally requested to father children with her. The husband agreed. They co-raised the resulting children. This was legal. This was documented. This was considered responsible citizenship. Polyandry, a woman with multiple husbands, typically brothers sharing a household, was also recorded in Sparta. In Athens, a woman who did any of this would be executed. In Sparta, the state considered it good resource management. But none of this, not the land, not the training, not the sexual arrangements, was what made Spartan women truly legendary. What made them legendary was simpler than all of it. It was what came out of their mouths. Plutarch collected their words in a text called The Sayings of Spartan Women. These are real quotes, documented, passed down through 2,500 years, and they are extraordinary. When an Athenian woman asked Queen Gorgo, wife of King Leonidas, the man who held Thermopylae against an empire, why Spartan women were the only women in Greece who could control their husbands, Gorgo looked at her and said, "Because we are the only ones who give birth to real men," not whispered, not followed by an apology, just said, out loud, to a stranger. A Spartan mother was once told her son had survived a battle, but had run from the enemy. She did not weep with relief. She did not embrace him. She said, "You are not my son," and turned away. But the most famous words any Spartan woman ever said were spoken at a doorway. Before her son left for battle, she handed him his shield, heavy, round, iron, and she said, "Come back with it, or on it. Come back victorious, carrying your shield, or come back dead, carried on top of it." There was no third option. In Athens, a mother who said that would have been considered a monster. Sparta eventually fell. The Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC broke it permanently. The population collapsed. The system Lycurgus built, radical, defiant, strange, crumbled slowly into stone, but the women left something behind that the stone couldn't erase. Cyniska of Sparta became the first woman in history to win an Olympic victory. After her death, Sparta built her a shrine, her name on stone, her legacy documented. In Athens, women died without their names on anything. The rest of the ancient world spent 500 years being scandalized by Spartan women. And 2,500 years later, we're still talking about them. Maybe that was the point. That was a day in her life.